let's transition to the Celtics since we're talking about wing plus players. Obviously, they traded for Jrue Holiday. You are an experienced Jrue Holiday advocate. I'm not even sure what this would be, but obviously you experienced the Jrue Holiday experience for quite some time. You saw him win an NBA championship with your team. I thought, in my opinion, and you can talk to me about this because this is from a Bucks perspective. Yes, he's had his inconsistencies as a playoff shooter, creator, efficiency wise, but I think a lot of those things will go away slotting into Boston because he's not being asked to play the same offensive role that he was in Milwaukee. Would you agree with that statement, or do you think maybe I'm chewing too much, biting off too much to chew?
I think it'll probably be somewhere in the middle. I really do think part of the reason he was so involved in Milwaukee is just he's literally, as of this past year, an all-star point guard. And I do think, even though obviously the Jays and Porzingis and I guess Derek White are going to provide a lot of offense, I mean, I would imagine that Jrue Holiday is going to have the ball and is going to have kind of those fluctuations that Bucks fans are used to. I mean, I think it was probably worse like in some of the series, especially like against Boston with Chris out. Although, of course, Jrue has always had some amazing defensive moments, but there were series when Chris and Giannis and Jrue were all playing, and Chris and Giannis, used a lot of possessions too. It's not like those guys are second fiddles to Jrue or in the way the Bucks are built. Yeah. And I think just you'd see just some shot selection it is curious. And all the Bucks fans are convinced he's going to shoot 40% from three in the playoffs because that's just what tends to happen when players come and go from the Bucks. Those percentages change, and we're all still not sure why. We're all, I think, little panicked. Is Dame going to shoot 28% in a playoff run? I shouldn't even said that out loud. Is that a double jinx? I don't know. I hope it jinxes the jinx.
It's going to be pretty hard to jinx Dame.
Yeah,
in the playoffs.
You would sure hope so. Hope so. Yeah. But I think defensively for what they lost in Marcus Smart, and I know there was some agitation over Jrue Holiday being ranked as a better defender in the GM survey. I mean, I think before all this stuff happened, I think it was kind of apparent Marcus Smart had stepped back a little bit in that era, and I think Jrue is a much better defender at this point in their careers. Maybe Smart had a bad year and proves us all wrong.
I would agree that like at this current stage of their careers, Jrue Holiday right now is a better defender than Marcus Smart.
Yeah.
I don't think that's too much of a hot take. I thought Smart had a down season. Maybe he kind of refigures things out in Memphis. Who knows? But as far as
based on what we've seen in the last year.
Yeah. Supplementing that, he's good. Right.
So to bring it back to the original question, I think Jrue helps them a lot. I think he makes them a much better team. I do still think, though, that probably their biggest issue as a team is offensively when they kind of just get stuck in a rut, right? Like you'll see like they kind of pass back and forth. It's all isolation, kind of, breaking guys down off the dribble. I do think there's going to be moments where that still exists with Jrue. I don't think he's a magic solve to those things. I mean, I think he's a good player and he makes them better, like I said. And obviously, defensively, he makes them wait. I mean, they clearly needed that. Derek White's a good point of attack defender, but I think they're going to feel comfortable throwing Jrue at a lot of wing players that they wouldn't like to throw Derek White at. Yeah. But I think that I want to see the offense. Like I'm really curious about this team because it seemed like the whole thing with Mazzulla was shifting them from defense to offense, like Grant Williams' role and just the way they played, Robert Williams' importance, and now he's not even there anymore. And now it's like you prioritize offense organizationally, but then you get Jrue Holiday, who's the better defensive player. Those things can coexist, but I just really want to see like how they play, like what their focus is, how they use these big guys, like how much are they playing Al and Porzingis? How much are they just playing one of them? I think it's going to be a fascinating year. I really, there's talk about are the Bucks going to start slow because they're figuring things out, and maybe, but I still think they're just good enough to win a bunch. I can't wait to see Boston because I think they're going to be, maybe they're as different as Milwaukee, but Milwaukee's is like, okay, yeah, Dame and Chris do a bunch of actions and they're, it's kind of obvious, right? Defensively, maybe it's more up in the air. Boston, I'm like, how are they going to play offensively? And I can't wait to see because I'm really curious, how it comes together. I think there's so much talent. I don't think it's as clean of a fit offensively, even though there is a bunch of their top six is clearly, one of, if not the best in the NBA.
A lot of that is on Porzingis, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think throwing that domino in there as this 3-point shooting, rim protecting type of big man, it could solve some issues, but it also makes them double down on what they were last year, right? The Celtics last year in the playoffs, we saw it. Making a lot of threes, they're winning that game. missing a lot of threes, they are not winning that game. It's just that's how easy it was. And if you're doubling down on that philosophy, we've seen teams in the past. The famous team is James Harden's Houston Rockets, but we've seen teams in the past where when you double down on jump shooting being your ideology, your philosophy as an offense, it can come back to haunt you in the playoffs. That's where you need Jrue Holiday's rim pressure. That's where you need Jason Tatum's rim pressure, Jaylen Brown's rim pressure. And the onus is going to be on those guys even more to create and create and create. The drive and kick stuff was clear. That was their kind of the benchmark of what their offense was supposed to be set like. I think the defensive, the way they look defensively is a little bit more clear to me, to your point, than what they would look offensively. And I think throwing Porzingis in there, especially with his availability, the questions of health. I mean, people had those same questions about Robert Williams, but Porzingis he had a great healthy regular season last year, but there still is that question of, hey, can he continue to manufacture healthy seasons? Maybe they bring him along slow. Maybe they, start Al and kind of load manage in a lot of ways, if you will, when it comes to Porzingis. I don't know. And I think that's what, to your point, makes them really, really fascinating. They also have that depth issue where it's like, okay, after 6, who are you relying on? Are you going to bring out O'Shea Brissett as a guy who can be a floor spacer for you, maybe big rebounder? They seem to like Delano Banton. Speaking from a Raptors perspective, good luck to you. You know what I mean? And I'm just not sure when it comes from a depth perspective from them. I actually think I have more depth questions with them than I do with the Bucks. And maybe it's like marginal. Maybe the difference between the depth is very, very slim, but I think I would give the advantage to Milwaukee. And when you're looking at this as sort of a playoff picture, and I know you're from a Bucks perspective, so obviously you might lean Milwaukee, but how do you think these two kind of pair up when it comes to a potential playoff series?
Yeah, I lean Milwaukee. I mean, I'm biased. I'm going to admit it. I mean, I try to be as little as possible. I try to not be, I don't know. I can't even think of an insane enough take of, Crowder's going to clamp the J. Nothing like that. I mean, it's nothing ridiculous. I think it comes down to, there's certainly the question of how you guard those wings is going to be big. And I think we're going to see a lot of like Crowder and Connaughton playing more than ever in that series, just to have more size. Obviously, those guys, I'm not saying Pat Connaughton is who you want guarding Jason Tatum. I'm saying I think the Bucks will skew bigger. We'll probably see less Beasley out there and more of the bigger guys. And I think, Milwaukee's defense, all defenses to a certain extent do. They're just betting more on that back line being awesome. And if you can make a team just be a jump shooting team over you, you probably have a good chance. I think that's what they're still betting on, is see how much Brook can play. And of course, Giannis on the back line there, maybe guarding primaries more. I think we're going to see that. I think he as a backline defender is going to be more important than ever too. Yeah. But I think you look at how the NBA often, not always, works, and the Bucks in the East probably have the best 2 players in most series. You could argue Philly, you could argue Boston. I mean, I'm not saying definitively, but there's certainly a case. And I think they're fit. And for all the, how does Milwaukee guard the Jays and Jrue? How does anyone guard Dame and Giannis actions? Like I think that's at least as big of a question, if not bigger. And the talent there is just, I think, stacked in Milwaukee's favor. Even if you want to say that Boston's 6 is better than Milwaukee's 6, I like Milwaukee's 2. I like Milwaukee's 8 if it matters. I agree with you. I think it's not decisively Milwaukee there, but I always bet on Giannis, and I think. I mean, this was a good 7-game series with no Chris Middleton. That was different teams for both of these teams now. Yeah. But it was a real close series. And I think if both teams are fully healthy, and I hope they are, and I hope this is the conference finals, I don't want, like when Milwaukee played Brooklyn in the second round, it sucks. And the next round is just weird after that against Atlanta, and then they went down. Let this be the conference finals. Let everyone be healthy. Yeah. That's the series I want. I like Milwaukee's chances. I think it's a hard series. I'm not saying they easily win or they for sure win, but I don't bet against Giannis ever. So I'm always take the Bucks.